creates the perfectionist child, because they know that their praise is only going to come if they perform at a certain level, and then they're paralyzed because they may not perform at that level. So when they get into college and mom and dad can't bribe the teacher or run roughshod or threaten the school with a lawsuit, all of a sudden they're starting to get B's and the world crumbles. And now they're getting C's, and then they drop out.
Well, they won't even go to B and C. They will avoid and flunk out because they're probably some of the most gifted and brightest people, but because they're paralyzed.
Yes.
And so here's a shameless plug here, is that we have the Himmer Institute online, and we have developed some courses in the sake of learning processes.
Right. And there'll be more coming on constantly. So we're just in the infant stages here.
So if you go to himmerinstitute.com and you want some resources, there's a couple of free courses. There's one for workplace relationships. There's a quick one for personal relationships. And then we have a course out there for the personal growth protocol. And that one's like, okay, I really want to work on myself, then that's the course for you. So check out himmerinstitute.com for some of our resources that we have out there.
So let's move back now. Mastery is the final one. So we've got the Dabbler, we've got the Obsessive, we have the Hacker, and we have the Paralyzed Perfectionist. And perfectionism, remember, is to hide shame. It's shame-based. It's an addiction. And you're worried about not being perfected.
Okay. So we might recognize ourselves as, what is it about me when I'm in or not in the zone of proximal development?
Right.
What is critical to understand as we move through a zone, we've got to reach out and find an MKO, a more knowledgeable other. And
if I could interrupt, Sherry, part of that zone of proximal development is what is known, what do I know right now, and what is not known, what don't I know? And both of these come back to primary questions. So what is known? I would also ask, what do I know that isn't so? So what am I telling myself that isn't true? And
That's
then
true.
What don't I know? So what questions need I ask at this point in time in order for me to grow further?
And that distance between what is known and what is not known is territory where bringing a more knowledgeable other in as a guide.
Right.
And that MKO can be a problem-solving guide. It's somebody, it could be peers that you collaborate. It could be a friend. But it's coming to that realization that when you're hitting that wall, you're hitting plateaus so often and you're frustrated, that there's resources. And that's why I mentioned Himmer Institute. In a way, a course can become an MKO, but often a coach. And you had a client who needed an MKO.
Yeah, I got a phone call about a year ago. This is really, it could be a host of these. This happens regularly.
Right.
I wrote my dissertation on workplace bullying and emotional intelligence. And some of our friends had a friend who was being bullied at work. So the challenge was, for this particular client, is she was going to work, and it wasn't what she knew, it's what she didn't know that was the challenge. So one of the first things we did is we went over the 5 tenets of emotional intelligence. And I'll review those for you real quick and then show you what we did here. So the first tenet is self-awareness. And in Dr. Siegel's world, awareness is just being aware of something like the 5 senses. How does it taste? What does it look like? How does it feel? Things of that nature. But awareness is also knowing what's happening in that space. How are you reacting to other people's comments, energy? So in her particular case, let me finish the 5 and then I'll go back to this if you can remember, because I'll probably forget. And then it's self-regulation. You can't regulate differently until you're aware of what's going on. In regulation, and this is interesting, first of all, you have to be aware of what's going on. That's called consciousness. That's a subjective state, by the way. We're just in the subjective experience of knowing. The idea of regulating, when you regulate, it means you're integrating. That's critical. So it starts with being aware of what's going on and then regulating a behavior. When you regulate, you're integrating your consciousness, your upstairs and your downstairs. The next one is self-motivation. Better said, being a lifelong learner. Notice how that is an axiom in life, that you grow. And that's where she was going. She was going, I don't know what I don't know. Can you work with me? She basically said, you're my MKO. I want you to work with me.
Right.
The fourth one is empathy. understanding what's going on through the eyes of another person. Empathy ended up being one of her biggest ahas in the process of dealing with the bullies at work. And she probably had 3 or 4 of them.
So that she took an empathetic view of them?
Yeah.
And that changed?
Yeah, it did.
Did it diffuse?
We'll go into that.
Okay.
And then the last one is interpersonal relationships. That'd be mutual trust and respect. So the first thing we did was I taught her how to be aware of behavior. First thing we did was name behavior. Why is that critical? Because if your consciousness is all subjective, and let me just grab that real quick. There it is. Eckhart Tolle teaches that when you let go of thoughts as judgments, you move to a place of neutrality. Every thought she had walking into work was a judgment.
Yeah. Like, oh, what are they going to do to me today? And
or she's mean. And
yeah.
I'm just quoting, she's a bitch. And she had like 4 of them at work, probably about 4 of them. And it was hard for her. She was the most tender-hearted, and this is typical, target. And that's what was going on. So what we did with her is first taught her to be aware of what was going on in her space. In that awareness process, she had to practice getting into the space of what's going on in their world. And when she realized what's going on in the world, we simply went back to the first axiom. They're hardwired to connect. And I said, what reasonable, rational human being would treat another human being that way? And there was a pause on the phone. And she said, no, a reasonable, rational human being wouldn't do that. I said, oh, therefore, what's going on? She said, they're in pain, aren't they? I said, yeah. What reasonable, rational human being would treat another human that way? One who's in pain. The empathetic position that she started realizing was that they were in a tremendous amount of pain and they needed to figure out a way to medicate their pain. And bullying is an addictive behavior that allows someone who was bullied or who was abandoned to medicate. That alone put her in a different mindset when she walked in. The second mindset was she was trying to be nice. She was trying to be liked. There's an awareness. So what did we do? We took away this overture of being nice to everyone in the office and giving them gifts and trying to be liked. And I told her, go back to yay, yay, and nay, nay. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, don't go in the office looking for a hello, how are you doing? Tell me about your evening. Because that's what you're doing. And every time you walk in there, you're setting yourself up for failure because they see you as a target and you're basically manifesting, see, kick me. So go in there and just be very straightforward and do your work. Don't bring undue attention to you. The smallest little things created a whole different sense of energy. That's all we're suggesting. So in the zone of proximal learning for her, she was in the outside of 10% the first time we talked. And she actually shut down. So when we regathered, we talked again, and sometimes she went to chaos. She got so frustrated, she fought back. She'd never fought back before. And she lit into her own supervisor. So she was trying to find this balance. Right. And that's what happens when we do it. We don't find that balance. We go too far one way because that's where we're stuck in our addiction. We get an MKO and we go too far the other way trying to figure out how to find balance. And that's where the plateaus come in. You're going to go back and forth. Let's just say your challenge right now is to lose weight. Let's say your challenge is to have a better relationship with someone. You're going to ebb and flow on this process. If you start with the identity, just being aware of who you are, that you have worth, then you will know you're going to make mistakes. So I broke this out just a second ago. In the perfectionist definition that we talked about, we've got these people who are shame-based, right? But the root of perfectionism is perfect. So I'm going to go back to the process of being perfect, and this is what I shared with my client. Your job is to go into work every day perfect. So let me give you context. Perfect is an experience or an event that is exactly what you need to learn to integrate, to bring neutrality into your space. Perfect's a mistake that gets a retake. Learn from what happened yesterday. What happened? Process it. Do mindfulness. Practice going into work the next day neutral, so your level of consciousness is raised. You're not going in with a subjective fortune telling of a cognitive distortion. and you're able to put yourself in a position for greater success. So in this case, the MKO got her the know-how to do something that she didn't know before because she wasn't aware that it was going on. So that would be the process where we took the 5 tenets of EI, emotional intelligence, and went to the basics. Just be aware of what's happening. This is what they're doing. This is how they're luring you in, and this is how you're taking the bait. So let's do a summary of today, and then we'll pick it up with a little bit more of the MKO in the next segment. So what's our takeaway today?
So the great example of an MKO in what learning needed to happen to handle bullying. We often come to the conclusion that there is no solution to workplace bullying or bullying, but
and often there isn't, Sherry.
There
often
are
you have to leave because you cannot control. And
that is still a solution.
Yeah.
But that an MKO guiding you through emotional intelligence could be a solution.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. Remember to tap into himmerinstitute.com, where we'll be continuing to add new courses there. They're asynchronous, so you're able to do this on your own schedule at your own time. And again, we'll see you in the next segment.
Doubt is a broken record that plays inside my head. I try to turn it down, but I can't quite drown it out. I'm tortured every day, these never-ending worries pulling on my sleeve.